having known the Lubovsky family for quite some time, I certainly am aware, and I'm just speaking to Gabrielle the other night, just what a difference your book made for them in terms of clarifying that the answers that they were looking for were the answers that they needed. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about books like yours in our country, filling a gap where seemingly the Truth and Reconciliation Commission stopped, and perhaps many say didn't do enough to actually complete and give people answers that were needed for us as a country and as people to actually heal ourselves and close important chapters and conversations that need to be completed. So what would you say in terms of the value of your book, and for other people who would embark on what is a somewhat dangerous, and certainly, not everyone's going to put themselves out there to go and dig up and look for the information that you have. How necessary is that in terms of what we need as a country, and what I imagine in Namibia would also need?
You hit on a very important point, that is corporate power in the world. And the TRC set aside probably 4 or 5 years to find those lower officers in the force liable. None of the big chaps ever came forward. None of them got amnesty. They set aside a full 2 days for economic injustice in South Africa. Can you believe it? With the greatest resources in the world and the biggest gap between rich and poor, and what caused it? They set aside a full 2 days to investigate that. Now, can I boast for a moment? I find that so difficult, being a humble fellow as I am. But the book was read by an economics professor in Durban, and he said, Nicholson, I've got to tear up my notes because I thought I'd written the definitive notes on the economic history of South Africa. But after reading your book, I'm having to reconsider all I've written. So for me, that was, look, it could be a lot of rubbish, but that's why you must buy the book. Make your own view up. I wrote it in a way that I thought, let the reader be a member of a jury, and let them at the end say, did Nicholson write sense, or is this what's the biggest insult a writer ever gets? Conspiracy theory. This is just conspiracy theory. So if at the end you think this is all conspiracy theory, then write and tell me, and I'll try and help you understand why I think it isn't. So I don't know how powerful corporations are in the world, but they fund political parties, they fund universities. I sometimes get the impression that there is a dearth of research on the economic and corporate powers in the world and in our country. That if you start examining that, you suddenly find there's no funding. You suddenly found you're dissuaded by your political science lecturer, because it seems to be almost taboo, a sort of ground you must never interrogate, or areas you mustn't look at. So, Nadia, and can I quote you? Maybe you forgot telling me about, you thought this book should be prescribed for people at universities, and they should be encouraged to read it, because, the truth is important in the world, I think, and if I'm not telling the truth, I want to hear about it, and I'll correct it. But as far as I know, some people may think it's a bit too detailed, but when you say telling stories like I am, you have to back it up with the authorities. That's why I footnoted. I don't know how many footnotes there are, possibly 1,000 footnotes. So every statement I make, which isn't a conclusion I draw, is footnoted, and it has all the authorities that I've cited.
So if I can just quickly say, it is true, because as a young person, I started to notice that history is written by the victors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that actually there's histories that haven't been written that need to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said this. I think it's actually my mother that said it, that this book should be prescribed to history. And then the other thing I wanted to say, and I also don't know if this is skirting on a bit of dangerous territory, but I wanted to challenge any journalists or people that write for newspapers that the part that seems to be written about is always the political aspect, which is true and we do know it. But I want to read an article where the corporates are being challenged, and it's never been published yet in terms of the interviews we've had. And I wanted to challenge any journalist to write about it, and if it appears in that newspaper, then you know your newspaper isn't being bought and controlled by a corporate.
Only Maverick will.
So that's kind of what I wanted to challenge